Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast shorts. There's no co-host on these shorts episodes. These are now around 2 to 4 minute, sometimes as long as 6 to 10 minute observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership. Because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 2 to 4 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book your coworker won't stop raving about because it quote-unquote changed their life, but you can't see any difference in their leadership behavior. So how good could that author be? Recently, I completed reading Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil by Hannah Arendt. This book is a collection of the articles Ms. Arendt wrote during the 1960 trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem for his actions as a member of the SS during the Holocaust and his contributions to the genocide of the final solution. During the 2 years that this trial took place, Arendt attempted to determine the facts of the case from going to Jerusalem in person and from the court transcripts released during and after the trial. In subsequent years, Arendt's approach to Eichmann's trial and what such a trial reveals about both the perpetrator of evil and the victims of such evil has been, to say the least, controversial. You can read about all of that, though, on Wikipedia if you want to. One of the more disturbing facts of the Eichmann trial is the least commented upon. Adolf Eichmann was engaged in acts that would lead to the murder of Jewish people in the Reich and everywhere else, and yet he gave no more thought to the committing of these acts than a person would give to making toast in the morning for breakfast. Thus the subtitle, A Report on the Banality of Evil. This is the part that was shocking to people of higher public moral character in the 1950s and 1960s, and yet it fails to shock us here in the early 21st century. Of course, that might be because we live in the backwash of quote-unquote administrative murdering of populations from the Cambodian Khmer Rouge to the Rwandan genocide of the 1990s. The fact that we fail to be shocked is shocking in and of itself, but it is also a sign that a corner of morality has been turned. Not that bureaucrats and managers in our postmodern society are less likely to behave like quote-unquote little Eichmanns, but that our lack of shock at a public level somewhat indicates a banal acceptance of this kind of grinding away at the foundations of a public moral order that was fragile to begin with. This is a book podcast focused on the intersection of literature and leadership, and being made with this bold assertion that Western civilization can be saved through understanding, appreciating, and applying the lessons that these great books give to us. And, because two things can be true at the same time, these lessons are lost when a moral culture declines into the pleasures of doom scrolling, pornography, and complaining endlessly, rather than actively doing. The administrative Eichmanns currently in the West in general, and in America in particular, rely on the decline working for them, even if they give no more thought to the implications of such a decline than Eichmann gave to moving Jewish people around Europe in train cars, bound inevitably for death camps. One other point from Hannah Arendt's work. The arrogance and hubris of our current moral era in the West, where we confuse technological and financial prowess with moral and ethical success, doesn't allow us to grant the appropriate moral weight to the implications of Arendt's work on people in our time. But the rising tide of a banal, thoughtless, and yet all-consuming bureaucracy drowns out the individual in any time, and aided by the growing power of large language modeling, the quote-unquote little Eichmanns, still scattered throughout bureaucracies and Western governments, will need only push a button in the future and then claim later that the quote-unquote mindless algorithm made them do it. But human beings are still responsible for their own actions, and it is human beings that must hold the line against the rising tide of thoughtless, algorithmically driven tyranny. This is Arendt's much larger contribution to the Western canon of literature by her reporting on Adolf Eichmann's trial in Jerusalem. And this is Arendt's warning down the years to leaders. Leaders are responsible for the actions of their subordinates, and they don't get to dodge such responsibility or consequences in this world, or even into the next. And, well, that's it for me.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.